At the height of the space race, the Soviets were not mistaken when they considered America's manned orbiting laboratory program a threat. In fact, within corridors of the Pentagon, several plans and strategies were being explored that would enable the Americans to spy on, capture, or destroy Soviet satellites. It was with this in mind that the Soviet Union decided they needed to equip their space stations for more than just taking pictures of the Earth below. Unknown to the public, Project Almaz was a secretive space program disguised as a civilian Salyut series. Included in the project was a task to fire the world's first space cannon, and it was only during the fall of the Soviet Union that this goal was found to be a success. As the space race was getting closer and both countries launched their astronauts into space, there came a need for another front that was not on Earth. That's when the development of top-secret space programs started, whose main purpose was surveillance and defense against the opposing side. Both the US and the USSR developed similar programs at different scales of protection. The US started a program called MOL, Manned Orbiting Laboratory, a classified military government-funded program that had defensive purposes. The American intelligence community was spearheading the project with help from NASA and the US Air Force. This project was started in 1963 when 14 astronauts were selected to perform military missions in space. The task of building a transport vehicle was given to NASA, while the construction of the MOL station was given to Douglas Aircraft Company. The transport vehicle would be a form of a VA capsule with a round front opening that would allow for more efficient transportation of the crew to the space station. Its reconnaissance satellite mission was a secret black project meant to gather intelligence and information about emerging spacecraft in the area. Therefore, the MOL's primary mission was to spy on Soviet aircraft. Another task that was thought of for the MOL was attacking enemy satellites, in this case the ones that belonged to the USSR. It was planned to be armed with a specific kind of missile that would fire at satellites and destroy them on the spot. If not destruction, MOL's task was to push those satellites out of orbit. We know about the MOL's mission because the documents were declassified over time. As for the people involved in the program, everything was top secret, and no one could share information with anyone. Even the astronauts that were applying for the job didn't know what their tasks were until after the selection. The MOL program came at a time when the US had a lot of foreign problems on Earth. Therefore, the funding that could go into the MOL project was moved elsewhere. A lack of funding came for one more reason: effectiveness. It was determined that other aircraft could do the tasks that were assigned to the MOL more cost-effectively. That would be proved later in 1985 when an F-15 fighter jet launched a missile at a satellite and successfully destroyed it, making this the first and only time for a spacecraft to be destroyed by a weapon. The crew was dismissed, but 7 of the astronauts were moved to the space program and flew on other missions. Even though everything was secret, Soviet spies still managed to get some information about the MOL to start their program. As the USSR gathered intelligence, they got information about the US plans to potentially destroy satellites from space. For this reason, Project Almaz was started. Just like the MOL, one of its tasks was to do intelligence research, but it also had a much bigger goal, which was to attack and defend itself from other spacecraft. The development of the craft took more time than anticipated, most notably because of the advanced techniques used for the spacecraft. One more reason which slowed down the program was the efficiency of the active satellites. Their reconnaissance tasks were performed with a high success rate, so there was no need for new ones to be launched. Project Almaz was repopularized after NASA launched its space station in 1973, thus becoming the first man-operated station in space. The USSR missed out on one more opportunity to be the first in the space race, so they needed to launch their own space station. The idea for the Almaz project was camouflaged under the Salyut project, which was already started in 1971. The reason for this was because the Soviets wanted to keep Project Almaz a secret so no one could know about this plan. The Almaz station consisted of 3 components: orbited piloted station, VA transportation spacecraft, and a cargo block. The orbited piloted station was the main part of the craft, a place where the astronauts were doing their jobs and where they were residing for the duration of their space mission. This was the space module. It was planned for the astronauts to stay in the station for 1 to 2 months. The VA transportation spacecraft resembled the one used in the MOL project. It was built similarly, with a pointed round entrance at its peak that would allow easier access to and from the station. The spacecraft was never completed. The cargo block was made for supplying the station with needed materials. The resupplying of the station was done with a TKS spacecraft that could have as many as 10 flights. Just like the VA, the spacecraft was never completed. The missions were carried out from 1973 to 1976, with a total of 3 aircraft launched. We don't have much information about the specifics of these launches because the information is classified and remains so to this day. The cannons were designed in the KV Tokmash Bureau, at the time headed by one of the most successful Soviet military weapon researchers and developers, Alexander Noodleman. The cannon model was based on the Tupolev Tu-22's weapon, the first supersonic jet made by the Soviets. The design of the cannon was changed. Tupolev Tu-22's cannon was 23 millimeters, while the one mounted on the Salyut 3 was a 14 millimeter cannon. The weapon was named R-23M. The strength of the cannon was great. It was estimated that it could fire up to 2 miles in distance and could fire up to 5,000 rounds a minute. Since the Soviets never shared or declassified the information about the R-23M, there were some flaws in the cannon. It was too static, which made aiming one of the hardest tasks at hand. The cannon couldn't rotate and change direction on its own. The whole space station needed to change its orientation, making it a very hard weapon to use in swift combat. The space cannon was never fired while the crew was stationed. The crew left the Salyut 3 space station in July 1974, and after that, no one was present at the site. The spacecraft was scheduled to call back in orbit on January 1975, and just a few hours before the landing, it was decided that the cannon could be tested. The reason why the cannon would be tested at this time was primarily because of safety reasons. No one was at the station, so there was no risk of having any human casualties. All of the precautionary measures were taken to ensure that the damage would be kept at a bare minimum, and that this is when the Soviets decided to test out their new cannon in space. The jet engine was ignited at the time the cannon was fired, minimizing the damage. The cannon fired 1 to 3 blasts, releasing a total of 20 shells. The Salyut 3 burned upon re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, so there was no footage of the cannons firing after the event. Although the facts about the shooting test remain classified, we know that the Soviet Union considered Project Almaz a success and continued developing spacecrafts similar to Salyut 3. The newer version didn't have a cannon attached to them, but did have interceptor missiles. The Soviet Union embarked on a crisis during the 1980s. With the start of the Afghanistan war and also having a crumbling economy, the Soviet Union was not prepared for anything other than saving its state. Interest was lost in the space program and funds couldn't be gathered to continue developing it. The space program Almaz was officially abandoned in 1979, surrounded by a veil of mystery with a big portion of the details unknown. Thanks for watching Decode. While you are here, go ahead and click on one of these 2 videos on your screen.